Did you know that one of the greatest benefits of journaling is what I like to call writing your worries? Let me tell you about it. So, I believe it was in the last episode of this podcast that I mentioned how beneficial it is for me to just make a list of all the things that are worrying me, concerning me, making me feel anxious, just writing my worries. It's what the Bible calls casting our cares. So in First Peter chapter 5 verse 7, we are admonished to cast our cares onto God because he cares for us in a way that no one else can. And he can do for us what no one else can do. So what the Bible calls casting our cares, I call writing our worries. And it really is such a simple thing to do. So I wonder why it is that we don't do it or we don't do it more often, including myself. There are many times when I would alleviate so much mental anxiety and emotional anxiety and mental strain if I would just sit down, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and just start to list the things that are worrying me. And it's amazing how once you sort of write down that first and second thing, it just sort of triggers this well of all of these deep worries and things that you've been suppressing or pretending that are not bothering you or that you're okay, and these things are not weighing on your heart and mind. As soon as you start to list them, that you'll be surprised how that list keeps growing and getting longer. And you will also be surprised about how much lighter you feel once you have, listed those things. So I think a hindrance to us doing that and why we don't do it a lot is our conditioning. We have been conditioned to project strength and to not admit when we are feeling weak or weak in an area or without strength, even if you don't want to call it weakness, but just where you are, something is weighing you down, something is dampening your energy. And I was just talking to a group of ladies the other day about this, how we feel like we have to carry all of the burdens of life on our own shoulders in our own strength, rather than going to God and saying, you are the God of the universe. You are sovereign. I know all of these things that are worrying me are not a surprise to you. Can you please help me? And just listing them. It's amazing how listing them will help get them off of our minds and hearts. If we look at it from a biological standpoint, there is the portion of our brain called the amygdala. And for trauma survivors, our amygdala tends to get triggered very quickly and very easily. And that is the emotional part of our brain where we tend to feel anxiety and worry and fear and concern. And that gets triggered. And when that gets triggered, and even if we've had developmental trauma, then that part of our brain can be enlarged. And so we tend to, that tends to be our go-to emotion. Our go-to response is one of anxiety and worry and fear. Um, and if that part of our brain is enlarged, then the prefrontal cortex, the logical, reasoning, rational, decision making, goal setting, and reaching part of our brain can be smaller. And so that is why so often we we develop what they call anxiety disorders, because that portion of our brain is really doing so much work. And I am one who years ago was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. It was a social anxiety disorder, but anxiety is usually related in some type of way to a potential reaction from people, right? So when we make that list, what it does is help take us out of that emotional part of our brain and help activate the more logical, more reasoning, rational part of our brain, which helps to calm our nervous system. So why wouldn't we do this, right? And here's the thing. God is not going to judge us. He's not going to judge us for being worried about some things, even though people might. People might say, well, you're not supposed to worry because you're supposed to be a man or a woman of faith. And so you're not supposed to worry. But, it's kind of pointless to tell a person who's already worried that they shouldn't worry. I'm already worried. So how about we deal with the worries, the things that I am worried about, and try to find some relief for the worries instead of denying that we are worried or feeling guilty because we have worries, right? Okay, so let me give you an example from my journal, one of my journals, about worry, what I mean when I say just list your worries. And these are worries that I actually had about starting this podcast. Because, whenever you start something new, you do something you haven't done before, even though you may be eminently qualified, there's some fear there, there's some worry there, some anxiety there, because there's all of these potential things that could go wrong. And so my mind ran rampant with all of the things that could go wrong. And that could be why it took me as long as it did, why I put it off for as long as I did before I actually went ahead and launched the podcast. But here's what I wrote. I put the word podcast, and then I just put bullet points underneath it, just listing all the things that I was worried about regarding the podcast. I put that my angle will be bad. Just even recording this, and I don't have a big fancy camera. I have my phone, but just that, what if my angle is bad and or I'm getting a glare, something like that. All of those things. What if the angle of my lighting is bad? So you worry about those details The next bullet point was that I won't be able to read my notes because I I'm really lazy with putting in my contact lenses. But if I wear my glasses, I have to take my glasses off to be able to read. If I wear my contact lenses, I have to put reading glasses on to be able to read. But if I don't have on my glasses and if I don't have any contacts, I can actually read. I can actually read my notes. Now, I might have to, get a little close to them. So if you see me look down and lean forward, that's because I'm looking at my notes. But I can read them. The next bullet point was I worried that I'll make a bunch of mistakes. Because remember, recovering perfectionist here. So, I'm going to make mistakes. And that's just part of it. But being able to admit it and not acknowledge it, express it, help me overcome that hindrance and go ahead and do it anyway. Just do it anyway. The next bullet point says, I worried that it will be the wrong date and time. I won't pick a good date and time and people won't watch or listen to it, right? The next one is that, and that ties into the next one that, okay, what if no one listens? But yes, I wrote about it because it was a thought, it was a concern. But once I got it out, I was able to get to the point of being able to say, but you know what? I'm going to believe God that it's going to reach the people that it needs to reach. And whenever that worry comes up again, then I cast it onto God again. I confess it again. Maybe I write it down again in another list of worries on another day. And then the last bullet point was that if the podcast fails, which leads to the question of how am I defining failure or success, right? Then that would mean that I am a failure. Not that I failed at something, but that I am a failure, which is a whole nother thing to unpack, which I actually started unpacking a little bit on the next page, but I won't get into that in this episode. So do you see how simple it was, but yet once I did it, then I was able to move that aside and go ahead and record episode 1. I didn't have my music file yet, but I had set a date and I knew that I needed to hit that date. I knew the content would be there. I knew I would be nervous. Even though I'm used to talking in front of people, I'm not used to sitting down at my desk talking into a camera. So that has been an adjustment for me, but I'm doing it. So that is what writing my worries has helped me to do. So I just want to mention a couple of things that I want you to take from this. One, that it's okay to admit your worries. Because what we don't want to do is have our worries and anxieties and fears controlling us. So we don't want to deny them. We don't want to be wrongly acting them out. We want to, in a safe and beneficial and helpful and healthy way, we want to acknowledge them. And then we want to cast them. And then the other thing is that we want to be able to regulate our nervous systems. and writing helps us to do that. You would be surprised if you would stop and think about it and just catch yourself and realize how many times throughout the day you're barely breathing. Your breathing is very shallow. And sometimes I'll stop and think, wow, I've been holding my breath. So writing your worries is a way to stop holding your breath and release some things so you can get on with what you need to do and need to be working on. All right? Okay. I just want to remind you before I go to pre-order your copy of my journal, my guided journal called Overflow, a 100-day self-discovery journal. And I thank you, the pre-orders, for those who have pre-ordered. The pre-orders have started coming in, and I'm very grateful for that. And also, just want to remind you to register for my free upcoming virtual journaling session, which will be only for an hour, and it'll be on one of the prompts in my Overflow journal. We had one already and it was great. It was fun. It was enlightening. Now this is the second of 3, and it's going to be on Wednesday, September the 27th at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can, I'll put the registration link in the show notes, or you can go to my Instagram or Facebook pages at Janet Lynn Boswell, and you can register there at those links, or you can go to my website, janetlynnboswell.com, and you can register there. So until next time, practice writing your worries. You won't regret it.